There's a town in Nevada where you can check into a motel from 1985 that's now crammed with 6,500 clown dolls, right next to a cemetery full of miners who died eating library paste. And somehow that's not even the weirdest part. America's full of nostalgia tours, right? Vintage diners, retro arcades, that one GameStop that still smells like 2007. But what they don't show you is the other America, the one that didn't choose nostalgia. It got abandoned mid-decade and never found its way back. These aren't tourist traps with Instagram-worthy neon signs. These are the real ones. Towns so stuck in the 80s that the locals drive on original brick roads, shop at stores that closed when Reagan was president, and live in houses older than the Vietnam War. Some lost their mills, some lost their malls, a few just lost the plot entirely. We're diving into 10 small towns you've probably never heard of, and might wish you hadn't. A place where an amusement park caught fire in 1984, and the whole city stopped trying. Another where 10,000 buildings sit completely empty, waiting for a population that's never coming back. Oh, and the one where the creek used to foam up 10 feet high from leather factory dye, and now nobody can grow vegetables without hitting massive amounts of leather under the soil. Think you know dead towns? Sure, but do you know the one where the Blues Brothers filmed a car chase, destroyed the mall, and then just left the wreckage there for 30 years? And trust me, you're not ready for what's next. Hit subscribe so next time someone asks you to move to a charming small town, you know which zip codes to avoid. Let's break it down. There's a date in Youngstown that locals still talk about like it's 9/11, September 19th, 1977, Black Monday, the day Youngstown Sheet and Tube shut down its Campbell Works plant without warning and laid off 5,000 workers in a single afternoon. Bruce Springsteen wrote a song about it. Historians call it the most symbolic date in Rust Belt history. And Youngstown never recovered. Let's talk numbers. Peak population, 170,002 in 1930. Today, about 59,000. That's a 65% nosedive, the kind of population loss that makes demographers uncomfortable. Median home price, $66,000. National average, $370,000. Nearly 40% of residents live below the poverty line, and the median age of the housing stock is 1951. Your house is older than your parents, probably older than rock and roll. But here's where it gets specifically 1980s frozen in time weird. On April 26, 1984, Idora Park, Youngstown's beloved amusement park since 1899, caught fire during a welder's lunch break. The Wildcat roller coaster and Lost River ride went up in flames while crowds stood outside openly weeping. One photographer said his cameras smelled like smoke for a week. A retired professor later said, "I've had so many people say, I met my wife at Edora," or "I proposed to my wife at Edora." We mourn the loss of the steel mills, but nobody thinks about steel mills the same way they think about Edora Park. The park closed that September, and somehow that feels like the exact moment Youngstown's calendar app crashed and never rebooted. Here's the thing, Youngstown doesn't feel abandoned in the creepy ghost town way. It feels abandoned in the way a party feels after everyone leaves, but before anyone cleans up. The infrastructure's still there, the roads still work, there are just way fewer people using them, and let me just say, if your idea of a good weekend involves touring the economic wreckage of American manufacturing while pondering late-stage capitalism, congrats. Youngstown is your Disneyland. Me, I like towns where the amusement parks are still, amusing. One urban planner put it perfectly. New Orleans lost half its population over a weekend. Flint, Cleveland, Youngstown, Detroit lost it over a generation. It's a major trauma to a community. Yeah, a trauma that's been ongoing since the 80s, and nobody's offering therapy. Oh, and fun fact, the original Edora Park carousel was rescued, restored, and now spins in Brooklyn Bridge Park, NYC as Jane's Carousel, a literal piece of 1980s Youngstown entertaining hipster families in Dumbo. Because of course it is. If you thought Youngstown was bleak, wait until you meet the town that makes Youngstown look like a thriving metropolis. Gary. Indiana is what happens when a corporation builds an entire city, names it after their chairman, and then ghosts it harder than your ex after seeing your Netflix password still works. US Steel literally created Gary in 1906, and then spent the next century slowly killing it. Population peaked at 178,000 in 1960. Current count, roughly 69,000. That's a 61% drop, second only to Detroit for American cities hemorrhaging people. But here's where it gets wild. More More than 10,000 buildings sit completely abandoned. 1/3 of all homes in Gary are vacant. That's not a stat, that's a horror movie premise. The Ambassador Apartment Ent Complex, built in the 1920s, was entirely abandoned by the mid-1980s. Furniture's still inside, schools still have desks and books scattered around like everyone walked out for lunch, and the apocalypse hit before they could come back. In 1994, Gary earned the title Murder Capital of the United States with 91 murders per 100,000 residents. Let that sink in. The town's solution to youth violence was existential dread via reflection. Here's the kicker: Gary is the birthplace of Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5. One of the biggest pop acts in history came from a city that couldn't sustain a functioning grocery store. The family home at 2300 Jackson Street is now a memorial surrounded by urban decay. It's like if Graceland was in Chernobyl, and Hollywood loves this place. Gary's ruins have been used as filming locations for A Nightmare on Elm Street, Remake, Pearl Harbor, and Transformers: Dark of the Moon. When your city doubles as a post-apocalyptic wasteland for Michael Bay movies, you've achieved a very specific kind of fame. One explorer wrote, "In many places, old furniture still sits, not untouched, but certainly forgotten. It feels like time has stopped completely, like the whole population just up and left one day." Gary doesn't feel like the 80s pressed pause. It feels like the 80s hit stop, ejected the tape, and threw the VCR out the window. But at least Gary's ruins are majestic. The next town went full nightmare fuel. Exactly halfway between Las Vegas and Reno sits Tonopah, Nevada. Population 1,842 and shrinking at 2.5% annually. It's a desert crossroads where the 1980s literally check you into a motel. Welcome to the Clown Motel, opened in 1985 by Leroy and Leona David, who built it next to the town cemetery where their clown collecting father was buried. Their original 150 clown collection has metastasized into 6,500 clown figurines, paintings, and marionettes stuffed into every corner of the motel, including eye holes that peer from a secret room. Next door, the old Tonopah Cemetery features tin tombstones with inscriptions detailing colorful ways miners died eating library paste, stabbed by her husband with a miner's candle holder. One visitor wrote, "Before heading to bed, I posted 'If no one hears from us again,' and then had one of the worst nights of sleep in my life. My wife tossed and turned and had vivid nightmares." Yeah, shocking. But the Clown Motel isn't why Tonopah froze in the 80s. That honor goes to Anaconda Copper. In the early 1980s, Anaconda announced a 200 million molybdenum mining operation north of town. The population boomed immediately. Jobs, money, future. Then in 1986, Anaconda pulled out completely. No explanation, just "nah, we're good," and a town left holding a bag of shattered dreams. The population's been sliding ever since. Median home value, 150,900 Median household income, 37,922. Cost of living, 12% below national average. Because apparently you get a discount for living next to 6,500 clowns. Oh, and Tonopah is home to the Tonopah Test Range, where the F-117 Nighthawk stealth fighter was secretly developed during the Cold War. So it's clowns, ghosts, and classified military aircraft. Just a normal Tuesday in Nevada. Travel writers keep calling Tonopah the town that time forgot, which is polite. More accurate, the town that time actively avoided. And if you think a clown motel is peak 80s weirdness, the next place literally looks like the set of Stranger Things. Travel writers keep comparing Ely, Nevada to Hawkins from Stranger Things, and honestly, they're not wrong. This high desert outpost at 6,400 feet sits on the loneliest road in America and exudes what one writer called a retro vibe that feels more like the 20th century than the 2020s. The economic collapse happened fast. In 1978, depressed copper prices forced Kennecott Copper Corporation to close its mines. The smelter at nearby McGill closed in 1983. Unemployment jumped to nearly 25% across White Pine County. Population dropped from roughly 6,000 to under 4,000, and it's been declining ever since. Here's why Ely feels frozen in 1983. The Hotel Nevada and Gambling Hall, built in 1929, features Nevada's oldest operating elevator, original to the building, a 24-hour casino floor with vintage slot machines, and celebrity-themed rooms honoring Wayne Newton and Jimmy Stewart. It closed in 1986 during the bust, reopened later, and now charges $69 1985 night, Stephen King reportedly stayed here and got inspiration for his novel Desperation. Make of that what you will. The McGill Drugstore Museum, 15 minutes north, looks exactly the same as it did when it closed 4 decades ago, just frozen, waiting. The Jailhouse Motel and Casino offers 60 prison-themed rooms where guests dine behind cell bars. Downtown Ely has over 20 outdoor murals depicting mining and railroad history. Essentially, the town wallpapered itself with its own obituary. One travel blogger wrote, "Downtown Ely's historic Main Street offers a time-traveling experience where vintage storefronts meet mountain backdrops, creating a postcard-perfect scene that hasn't changed its prices since the Reagan administration." Honestly, Ely isn't creepy. It's just weirdly peaceful, like someone put the whole town in a snow globe in 1983 and occasionally shakes it to make sure the residents are still moving. Would you live in a place where the biggest attraction is a hotel elevator from 1929? Yes or absolutely not? Let me know in the comments. And if you think Ely is stuck in time, the next place got famous because the Blues Brothers destroyed it and nobody ever cleaned up. Dixie Square Mall opened November 10th, 1966. Cost $25 million, closed November 1978. Just 12 years later, one of America's fastest mall failures. But that's not why it's famous. In mid-1979, director John Landis rented the vacant mall for 8 weeks to film the iconic Blues Brothers car chase scene. The production dressed up fake storefronts, drove cars through the interior, and then never repaired the damage despite their agreement. School District 147 sued Universal for $87,000. The wall the cars crashed through stayed visible inside until the mid-1980s. Then teenage vandals broke in during 1984 and destroyed every pane of glass. Within a year, all salvageable metal was stolen. Packs of wild dogs and thousands of rats moved in. Trees grew through the caved-in ceiling. At least one murder was committed inside. Multiple arsons followed. It became the most famous, infamous dead mall in the world. Harvey today, population 18,827, declining at 1.49% annually, down 34.1% since 2000. Median household income, $41,091. Poverty rate, 25.22%. Crime rate of 42 per 1,000 residents makes it safer than only 7% of U.S. cities. The mall was finally demolished in 2012 using $4 million in Illinois state disaster relief funds. The irony, Hurricane Ike money paid to tear down a building the Blues Brothers destroyed. And here's my question: how did a mall close in 1978 and then haunt a town for 34 years? That's not a dead mall, that's a zombie mall, with a guest appearance by Jake and Elwood. Harvey is proof that sometimes the 80s don't just press pause, they press delete and leave the file corrupted in the recycle bin. But if you think Harvey's mall story is tragic, the next town lost 93% of its population and the stone buildings are still waiting. Lynch, Kentucky represents perhaps the most dramatic population collapse in America. Peak population in the 1940s, 10,000. Current population, approximately 649. That's a 93% loss. Let that math sink in. If Lynch were a person, only their left arm would still be alive. U.S. Coal and Coke, a subsidiary of U.S. Steel, founded Lynch in 1917 to fuel Pittsburgh area steel mills. On February 12, 1923, workers set a world record, 12,120 tons of coal in a single 9-hour shift. Then came mechanization, declining coal demand, and the slow dissolution. U.S. Steel began selling homes to residents in the 1950s, started dismantling Lynch in 1962, and sold its mines in 1984. The railroad to Lynch was officially abandoned in 1996. Here's what makes Lynch hauntingly beautiful. Italian stonemasons built all public buildings from locally cut sandstone, post office, bathhouse, schools, company stores, with craftsmanship suggesting permanence. These buildings were built to last 200 years. Now they stand with window glass broken and vegetation clambering over the stone walls. Entire streets have fewer than half a dozen occupied dwellings. The mayor said it plainly: "I don't care if they mine another lump. They mined here 100 years and they still left us poor." Current economic reality: median household income, 2000 census, $17,609, 37.8% below the poverty line. line, 57.6% of children living in poverty. The town lives month to month financially, barely able to afford to pay their 5 city employees. Lynch isn't stuck in the 80s because of nostalgia. It's stuck because nobody can afford to move forward, or move, period. And the irony? In 2017, solar panels were installed on the Kentucky Coal Museum in neighboring Benham. The Coal Museum went green. You can't make this stuff up. Picture this. You're walking through Lynch on a foggy morning. Stone buildings loom on either side, windows empty, vegetation creeping up walls like nature's trying to reclaim what humans abandoned. It's beautiful and apocalyptic at the same time. Lynch doesn't haunt you because it's creepy. It haunts you because it's proof that entire communities can be disposable. And if Lynch is proof of disposability, the next town is proof that environmental regulations can accidentally murder an industry. From 1880 to 1950, 90% of all gloves sold in the United States died. Made in Gloversville, New York. Over 200 glove manufacturers operated here. The city's name is literally Glove City. Then came the Clean Water Act of 1972. The law required million-dollar wastewater treatment systems that tanneries couldn't afford, not while already losing to Asian competition. By the 1980s, most factories had closed. Today, only a handful of specialty operations remain. Population, 23,634 in 1950, roughly 15,131 today, a 36% decline. Median home prices, $76,500 to $160,000, depending on who you ask. Housing vacancy rate, 14%. Poverty rate, 24%. Gloversville feels like it's frozen in the 80s for several reasons. Over 56% of its housing stock was built before 1939, making it among the oldest in America. Downtown, many storefronts are abandoned, with windows boarded up in plywood, giving the area a neglected, time-stopped vibe. Meanwhile, the 12 to 15-room Victorian mansions once owned by glove magnates can be purchased surprisingly cheaply, and the ruins of the Zimmer and Son glove factory still stand as a lingering landmark of the town's industrial past. But the environmental legacy is the truly weird part. Residents report discovering massive amounts of leather under the soil when gardening. Cayuga Creek once ran different colors daily from tannery dyes, foaming up into sudsy crests 10 feet high. One local niche review: our little community is dying. The once booming glove industry has disappeared, and there are no jobs for the hard-working family. The small businesses are not able to make money, and our town is filling with crime. Still operating. Samco Gloves makes 100,000 plus pairs of leather dress gloves yearly for the US military. The only thing that has saved us is that clothing for the military has to be made in the USA, so Gloversville survives on military contracts and nostalgia. And when you dig in your garden, you hit leather. Honestly, I don't know what's more 1980s. A town named after an industry that doesn't exist, or discovering buried leather in your tomato patch, like archaeological evidence of capitalism. But if you think creek foam is weird, the next town has a mascot named Potter Pete, and he's a kiln with feet. East Liverpool, Ohio, was once the pottery capital of the world. At its peak, over 200 pottery factories employed 7,000 workers operating 270 kilns, producing more than half of all U.S. ceramics. In 1970, the population exceeded 26,000, but today it has shrunk to around 10,000, a decline of over 60%. Poverty is high at 30%, with a per capita income of about $16,000. Only 2 potteries remain: Fiesta Tableware and American Mug and Stein. The town's 80s time capsule vibes are still visible. The school mascot, Potter Pete, is a giant kiln with a face and feet. Street names like Dresden Avenue, Etruria Street, Wedgwood Street, and Ceramic Street honor its English pottery heritage. 3 districts are on the National Register of Historic Places, and a Carnegie Library built in 1902 still stands. One visitor observed, "It's a city where almost every second or third house seems to be abandoned, and not just abandoned, some are burnt out." The locals talk about the incessant and merciless drug traffic. A retired newspaper editor used the past tense. I feel comfortable using the past tense here. Former pottery center of the United States. East Liverpool doesn't feel stuck in the 80s. It feels stuck in an alternate timeline where nobody told the town the pottery industry died, and it just kept pretending everything was fine. Also, random dark trivia. Pretty Boy Floyd, the notorious bank robber, was shot by the FBI in a cornfield just north of town in 1934. East Liverpool has been dealing with criminals and declined for a very long time. Would you live in a town where the mascot is a kiln with feet and half the houses are burned out? Yes or absolutely not. And if East Liverpool's pottery nostalgia isn't hitting right, the next town has the original brick roads from the oil boom still intact. The Texas oil bust of the 1980s hit panhandle towns like a freight train made of foreclosure notices. Pampa peaked at 24,064 in 1960 during the petrochemical boom. Current population, roughly 16,319, a 34% decline. The 1980s collapse. When oil prices crashed to 10.42 barrel by 1986, Texas saw 204 businesses fail out of every 10,000. The rig count dropped from 4,500 in 1981 to 663 in 1986. One famous Texas bumper sticker from the era: "Please God, give me one more oil boom. I promise not to piss it away." Today, the town struggles with a 17.6% poverty rate, violent crime 68% above the national average, property crime nearly double the national rate, and a 1 in 38 chance of becoming a crime victim. Here's the time capsule detail. One local wrote, "I love the little town atmosphere that you feel when you're driving downtown on the original brick roads. Those brick roads from the boom era remain. Nobody's paved over them. Whether that's charm or budget constraints is up for debate. The Panhandle drugstore goes back to the 1920s and still has the original soda fountain. They moved to the current location in the 60s, and the place still looks like it did back then. The Panhandle Inn, built in 1924 in Southwest Pueblo style and once the finest hotel between Denver and Fort Worth, closed in 1972 and remains standing in disrepair. Local perspectives paint a stark picture of life in Pampa. One resident described the city bluntly: "Redneck cops, no upkeep of any kind. The city is garbage. I can't wait to get rid of my house to whomever and move any place but here." Another added a sense of long-term frustration. "I would like to see the city take more initiative to make the city more alive, but in the 30 years or so that I've lived here, I have never seen that, and I don't ever see it happening." Pampa isn't frozen in the 80s because it wants to be. It's frozen because nobody can afford the thaw. And if Pampa's brick roads feel nostalgic, the #1 spot makes all these towns look optimistic. Martinsville's story reads like an economic horror story in 3 acts. First, it was the plug tobacco capital of the world in the late 1800s. Then it became the sweatshirt capital of the world from the 1950s to the 1990s. Now it holds a different title: highest unemployment rate in Virginia for years. The population peaked at 19,653 in 1970 and has dropped to around 13,584 today, a 32.4% decline. Employment numbers are catastrophic. In the early 1970s, unemployment was just 1.9%, less than half the state average. Between 1993 and 2002, the town lost over 9,000 jobs as virtually all factories closed, including Tultex, which abruptly shuttered in December 1999. Unemployment briefly hit nearly twice the Great Depression state average. The cause: NAFTA and globalization made textiles and furniture manufacturing unsustainable in the US, and nobody in Washington stopped it. The Textile Workers Relief Act of 2000 was introduced and failed. Locals are blunt about life there. One said, "I moved here over a year ago from the north and was treated poorly. Racism is a huge issue in this town. Job opportunities and job growth are scarce. It's a retirement town overrun with drugs." Another recalled, "We used to be world famous for being the sweatshirt and textile capital of the world. What remains? The Martinsville Speedway, the shortest track in the NASCAR Cup Series at 0.526 miles, paperclip shaped, one of the first paved speedways. And Liberty Fair Mall, opened 1989, renamed Village of Martinsville in 2014, a name change that fools absolutely nobody. The irony: Martinsville is now growing younger faster than any other Virginia locality. Rock bottom housing prices and remote work are bringing in a new generation. Whether they'll stay after discovering it's a ghost house with dumbest leaders remains to be seen. Martinsville isn't stuck in the 80s, it's stuck in the aftermath of the 80s, the slow motion train wreck that followed globalization. And honestly, that might be the most American story of all. These towns didn't decline gradually, they froze. Mid-sentence, mid-decade, mid-dream, and nobody figured out how to hit play again. You can visit them today, walk their brick streets, stay in their vintage motels, browse their shuttered storefronts. Just don't expect them to acknowledge the last 40 years happened, because as far as they're concerned, it didn't. Like this video if you now understand why charming small town is sometimes code for economic disaster zone with vintage aesthetics. Subscribe because someone needs to document what happens when capitalism changes its mind and leaves entire communities behind. And hit the bell because next time we're diving into the towns that are somehow even weirder than these. Remember, not all ghost towns are empty, some are full of people who just haven't realized they're living in a time capsule yet. So yeah, 10 towns where the 80s pressed pause and never hit play again. Honestly, at this point, I'm not sure they're even looking for the remote anymore. They've accepted their fate. Meanwhile, I'm over here wondering, if you grew up in Lynch, Kentucky and you've never left, does the present even exist? Or are you just living in an extended flashback episode that never ends? Deep thoughts for a Tuesday, or is it still 1984? Hard to say in these places. Stay weird, America, and maybe invest in some new infrastructure.